All right. Yes. Okay, great. So we are live and welcome everyone to our Q&A. We are so sorry for that delay, but you know how these technical things go. Happy Carnival Saturday, wherever you're joining us from. This is the Q&A to follow the panel discussion. You just watched Carnival Bodies. And if you didn't just watch it, you missed a treat, but guess what? The video is still up and available for you on Facebook, and it will be posted to YouTube shortly. We do have with us all our panelists this evening. I'm very happy to report. We have Rosamond King, who was not on the panel, but she's very much present for your questions. We have Elisha Bartels, Amir Hall, and Robert Young. Again, good evening and welcome to the Q&A for the Carnival Bodies Carnival Conversation. Okay, Rosamond, so we ended that discussion with your video, and I just thought it would be useful to get your impressions of the panel and what came out of that for you, what struck you.
Absolutely. Well, first I wanted to say thank you to Bocas Lit Fest, which does such amazing work, not just with literature, but with Carnival and with Caribbean culture and Trinidadian culture in general. So it's a pleasure to join all of you. And it was a real pleasure to watch the conversation. You had a bunch of brilliant people, and it was really wonderful to see a mask maker, a mask player, a wina gal, and other interdisciplinary artists all reflecting on the breadth of how gender and sexuality are expressed in our carnival.
And, Elisha, I wanted to say to you, because we didn't get to discuss it much, we couldn't discuss it in our conversation, but when you said, I am not sexy, I think that was a shocker for all of us. And I wouldn't be surprised if our viewers were also pretty startled to hear that. What's that?
You never hear me say that.
No,
I say that all
we
the
never
time.
had that conversation. And I just wanted to disabuse you of the idea that you were not. Because somehow we all see it, right? But I suppose that's true of life. We all see things, everybody sees things that we don't sometimes. And so I want to just reassure you that you are very much sexy. Not that you need me to tell you, but I'm just putting it out there, all right? Okay, so we're getting ready to take your questions and your comments about today's conversation. And while we are getting ready for those, I just want to also bring Amir in. Amir, because we talked a lot, you in fact talked a lot about masking queerness in Carnival, and I wanted to get your impressions in particular of Rosamond's video.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Yeah, Rosamond, I also want to echo the thank you to Bocas, the thank you to Ardene and Marielle and the team for organizing this. This is such a necessary conversation, and like I posted on Instagram, I've had thoughts, you know what I mean? Because I've been observing for so long, and Rosamond's video really, this is one quote I'm still sitting with around. She said, they are like people would hide in plain sight, right? So it was an opportunity for queer people to participate in queerness, you know what I mean? In a way that was safe, in a way that was that wasn't ridiculed, you know what I mean? And that's what it always had been for me in my little bit of carnival experience playing Old Mass in secondary school. Yeah, like I always played the Dame Lorraine, and it was even surprising to me to find that to find out that the Dame Lorraine isn't played by men so much now. And so now I treasure that experience more, knowing that it was as rare as it was. Yeah.
Okay, so we are getting ready to take some comments from you. One person on Facebook said, love how Robert said he has to be masked to dance in his own body. And now many women have to get the face made and airbrushed and gym every day to dance in their own bodies. So is there really a true freedom and release in our carnival, or is that performance? Anybody feel free to take that one?
This is something that we kind of brushed up against in the conversation that we had. And I've been thinking about it ever since then, this idea that there are people who would suggest that, might suggest that women in particular who play bikini beads and feathers masks are not playing masks because it's just the bikini and it's not a character that they need to become, and etc. etc. But we talked also about, in years gone by, there was more of a ritualistic preparation that a person would would do for themselves when they were going to play mass, and that it isn't like that anymore. But at the same time, those things are still happening. They're just a different version of them, because these women, young women, playing bikini mass, not putting themselves through a ritualistic preparation wherein they prepare their bodies and ready themselves for the road? And are they not wearing a mask, as you just brought up? Like it's been kind of a turning over in my head since we spoke about it, that, you know, it's this evolution of the thing, but at its heart, is it not much the same? This preparation and masking, and, you know, so even though they are not necessarily going out there to play a character in the way that we think of when we think of the more traditional carnival characters, maybe they are still, though. I think Robert referenced it last time as playing Queen of the Universe. Or no, Miss Universe, not Queen of the Universe, Miss Universe, like Miss Universe, Miss World. I think that was what it was he was getting at. And yeah, I think that there's something in that, you know, the idea that it is still connected to that ritual preparation and masking and all of these things that we think have gone away, but maybe they've changed.
And
It'd be
Amir, someone is asking if, coming out of the discussion and, you know, the experience of, you know, chatting with Robert, Rosamond, etc., do you now feel more inspired to play your own mass?
Yes, very much so. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I remember after that, after that, you all were saying, and I agree completely, that Carnival doesn't make space for you. And I think that's one of the that's one of the things I feel like, again, disqualifies the like pretty mass thing as Carnival, is because it is state sanctioned. And of course, you know, people make use of it in different ways and stuff like that, but like it actually feels like I feel more confident now, knowing that, and like having that kind of like support, and like, other than just like, you know, in saying it, I know that these are people I could look to if I want to design a costume, or if I want to, you know, find out where it's going down. I know I could like look to these people and be like, hey, what's happening? Where can I go? And that means a lot to me. Yeah.
So is it that, how do you all see the problem? Is it that people don't know the origins and therefore don't pay homage to the origins? Or is it that you think people should be observing the origins of Carnival because that is our history, that is the legacy of our ancestors, etc.? And so is it incumbent, you think, on people now to play that mass?
I'm very happy to hear, you know, I was very happy to hear that Amir had the experience of playing Dame Lorraine in QRC. I always try to go and see at UE, you know, there's old mass that's put on every year. And even the evolutions of what we call old mass or traditional mass, the kind of contemporary La Jablesse character that was played one year during traditional mass. I'm very happy to see all of that. I do think it's really important to know the history of Carnival, but I don't endorse the idea that we need to be prescriptive and that we need to tell people you must play this kind of mass at this kind of time. I think tradition is only as old as memory. And the whole nature of Carnival is that it's innovative. It responds to the fashion of the moment, the politics of the moment, the vibe of the moment. So I really think it's important to let people, as Elisha said in the conversation, have the Carnival experience that they desire.
Robert, do you have anything to say to that? Oh, you need to unmute, Robert.
Unmute.
Right. Yeah. Kevin Brown once said that the mass with the feathers and beads is then like an ancestral mass of the indigenous. So it's like a mourning mass of genocide. And that's really sad that he sees it like that. That people may not be aware of that you are playing an Aztec or a Mayan person, but it's like in memory of them, but not even with real feathers or with real jewelry. It's plastic. So it's like you're recognizing the theft. So there is something strong there that we don't see. So that's one thing. And yeah.
Robert, maybe as we're with you, someone is asking, how is vulgar fraction continuing the traditions of the mass you know of in the 60s and the 70s?
Well, first thing, two things. I was thinking about how vulgar fraction will operate maybe next year, is that it provides a platform for people like Amir who would want to be in Carnival. That's what vulgar fraction is in the first instance.
Mhm.
It's a group of people who can make things, skill like stitchers, blah, 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 and giving the opportunity of a player to get some kind of direction from me or someone else. And then they themselves make their costume. They themselves pick up the brush. They themselves do the things. But we just give them certain parts to help hold the thing together. But it's your mask, right? So it's nearly like taking on the tradition of sailor mask, where you get your white shirt and your white pants, and you go and buy your material and you decorate it. So it's that. And one mask I would love to play, and I think it's something that we see all the time, is nearly like the CPEP costume, the whacker, the screen that blocks the thing. That could be a very big placard with words that people could put messages out.
Yeah.
The masking, like the t-shirt over the head, the apron. That's something that we see all the time and we understand. That is a very working class thing that we just let pass all the time as a form. Because I do how the sailor mask was generated. There's a contemporary thing at that moment, right? But there's also ancestral, because I went one time to some museum in London and I saw a mask from Ghana that was looking like sailor mask, right? So it wasn't just trying to mimic American sailors. It was some ancestral thing that the thing, the same way like how Nicholas Payton says jazz is ancestral memory music, ancestral messages or tones. I think the mask has a lot of that in it. No matter who does it, and even if it's tribe, red, the mask of red maybe just be Ogun, the yellow maybe Oshun. So you see them in the colors, because in Carnival itself, there is sometimes energy that is sometimes a feminine energy or masculine energy. Things like Toro Toro, that was definitely a masculine energy. Songs like what Fian sang about the Boom Boom, that was a feminine energy. That happens all the time, because Carnival is a feast. Is an offering.
Sorry, we have a question from Jeremy Rambaran. Thank you, Robert. I come from a part of Trinidad where Carnival is not celebrated at all. Why do you guys think this non-participation occurs in many parts of Trinidad, especially South? Who's ready to take that one on?
I will, because I've talked to my mom, who's from Princesstown, many times about the fact that, her mother was a teacher. They were not allowed to participate in Carnival. It was considered something vulgar, something common. And I think it's that respectability politics that is part of why a lot of people in South don't participate in Carnival. And I think, unfortunately, and Robert, you spoke to this a little bit about the location of Carnival, that, at one point it was in downtown Port of Spain. It was kind of moved to uptown Port of Spain. And I think some people see it as a town thing. And not something as much for people to participate in South. And I do think it also goes back to build on another one of Robert's comments, to money as well, right? And how people choose to spend their money and invest it in something that seems to them or to their community to be a prestige activity.
That also, that I have a question actually, which is I don't know much about the demographics of participation in Carnival, but is there like a racial dynamic to like that demographic? You know what I mean? Like, I wonder, are there as many Afro-Trinidadians as there are Indo-Trinidadians playing Carnival? Is that like a thing?
Elisha, do you want to posit?
And does it matter also?
To be honest with you, it's not a thing I give a lot of thought, because I sort of feel as though Carnival is there and we all know it's happening, and anybody who wants in will come in. That's how I look at it. But then I also am somebody who knows fully well that Carnival is to claim your space, as we spoke about the other day.
Yeah.
So maybe I kind of take that for granted, and therefore I don't give that stuff a huge amount of thought. But if I were to think about what I've seen, I would say I guess there are less people of Indian descent playing mass, at least, because when I think of what I've seen, I'm thinking about like Parade of the Bands, and when I am in Panorama walking along the drag, I would say yes, I see more people of African descent than Indian descent.
Yeah.
But then when you come to something like Parade of the Bands, now there's the demographic of the individual bands, right? That is something that I might have a clearer sense of, because it is so obvious on the road.
Right.
You know,
right.
it is very easy to see the demographics of an individual Carnival band once you see the band on the road. But like I say, again, I don't think about that stuff too hard, simply because I believe that Carnival is there, and we all in Trinidad and Tobago at least know exactly when it's happening. And if you want in, you will come in.
That's
Whether you feel like your community does it or not, if you want it, you know where it is.
right.
Shivani,
Again, I take that for granted, right? I accept that.
I feel like I would push back on that a little bit, because I feel like this permission that I feel now to say I can find a space has only come from meeting you all. You know what I mean? And a lot of people don't even have points of contact for that kind of entry. And so I wonder, what about the institution of Carnival as it's become like this institutionalized thing? What about that? Like, what are the barriers for access that we're not seeing, right? Because we don't know if people want to play down south. Like, what if there are people that want to? What's keeping them?
But there are, I mean, to say that there are bands in South Trinidad as well, the Calicharans, the Jagassars, well-known established carnival bands. I mean, that have family, generations of families who have been involved in mass and traditions as well. So it's not happening at all.
Right.
So it
Ali?
is. Yes, Robert?
So say for instance, the Karipuchaima project, it is older than the CDC, this Carnival Development Committee, that was before the NCC. That family down in Karipuchaima. That's one. I think to tell people that they have to find their space in Carnival is like how groups who want to be included and excluded because of class and race and all that skin color stories, hair texture things, is oppressive to tell them, you just find and figure out your space. So it has to have a welcoming understanding of people not wanting to be part of it, but also because Carnival has like tribe has been able to figure out the nuance of exclusion and inclusion. People understand that when they see, like how we see bodies and skin color and hair texture, and just going in a room, people are now get it because it comes in a box. It is packaged in a way like you could buy a bottle of cologne, a bottle of rum, So you get it in a box, and you have a product that, so people who never would have played Carnival before could access it now because it is marketed and branded as something to do if you are in. So that has allowed a lot of people who never played Carnival before to play Carnival because it gives access to another thing, the experience of Carnival, the experience of being selected or be included, being not on the outside, but in the inside, in this thing, gives people legitimacy. So it also divides, but also people can buy the package of it.
If they can afford
I think that's a conversation, that's a debate that comes up every carnival as well, right? The commercialization and commodification of the things that we support in the season. But I feel like that's also an entirely separate conversation. Shivani is saying, thank you so much for this rich panel. A question for all our participants as we move forward into an evolving queer present and positive mass. Are there any tropes of masquerade and masking you would like to see left behind? Can we productively put all stereotypes to rest without enforcing a different, if unintentional, type of erasure?
Mm.
And that's for everyone.
All tropes.
What would you
I
like
think
to
that's
see
an
left
excellent.
behind? Sorry. Yeah.
I think that's an excellent question. I mean, I think one of the things that it would be great to see left behind is that sense of the band as clique, as exclusive, as, you know, historically bands sometimes even went to war against each other, but in other times they went to war against the government or against the establishment. And so I wish that we could find that it have that friendly kind of banter with, you know, between bands, and not have it be so much that, well, you have to be light enough and pretty enough and skinny enough and rich enough to do this one, and so we're antagonistic against each other with the bands. But that's also speaking to a larger question about society as a whole, right, in terms of trying to come together to solve some of the persistent problems that exist.
I want to jump on that and say that I agree completely. And for me, it's just like the politics of exclusivity that is inherent in capitalism, and that's taken over Carnival in a way. Like that, to me, is the thing that we need to leave behind. I think we need to do a complete 360 and figure out how do we include as many people as possible. Carnival, like what about disabled people? You know what I mean? Like it's not for them in a way, and it's not in the same way that it's not for, like, you know, standard body type people. So I would like to see our you know, band leaders and designers and stuff like that, like critiquing their own kind of like participation in this exclusivity, and like trying to include more people, you know, and also, like Robert said, give permission to people to not want to participate as well. Like there's the two things that I feel like need to happen.
How do you think, this comes from Ty Lovelace. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Did everybody answer? Everybody who wanted to answer?
I was just going to talk about like people like Irwin McWilliams. He had the biggest bands in the 70s that were like massive. He was the first person to kind of organize and distribute bands. The sections of bands being given to people, and they do their sections in Tanapuna and exposed to it in Aruka, and building a band like that. But it was a black band leader with all kinds of sizes of people winning band of the year over and over and over and over and over. And then there was the George Bailey, who kind of innovated certain things in Carnival, like the old concept mass and all of that, that allowed other who would normally play. Because if you watch, it saw some footage on Trinidad and Tobago archives, and there were bands full of Chinese and light-skinned people since in the 50s, right? Like, and still the thing I always remember is the Black Indian band with the big thing on their head, and they're holding their plaits to balance the costume on their body. And those costumes, people walk to the beat them, and they get nearly booed off on stage. So even up to now, people want to know why these strange costumes end up in King and Queen at Carnival with people who are just making things with the best things they have. So I don't know if that's the same question about the exclusion. The ropes have come back. Burger fraction people get put out of bands because we have no truck. We depend on other people's music. Even standing up in front of their banner, we get pushed. Even if we're in the back of the band, we get pushed. Because it's what are you? Are you a band? How could you be a band and look like this? So there is I remember the year the government did the band, the People's Band. They went and pulled rope because the people who are doing the band felt that is what people do in a band. You pull rope to separate your band, and they don't know that you are People's Band and you are blocking who out of the band. We told them you would leave if you pull this rope. Right? It is so insane. New rope that they pull out because they're going to judging point, and they pull rope in the People's Band where people were just getting access to trucks to be in a band. So
Yeah,
it's that crazy.
Yeah, that's cluelessness for sure.
Yeah.
Elisha?
The rope is actually the very thing that I was going to bring up. I completely agree with Amir and Rosamond in terms of the tropes to leave behind being those that serve the exclusivity attitude, because I totally believe in a completely inclusive carnival, one that facilitates as many of us as possible. And the rope as an actuality and as a symbol needs to be left behind, and all the other things that contribute to that exclusivity approach as well, the body shaming and the colorism and the, you know what I mean. I get really upset when people complain about large women in little costumes. It bothers me so much when people make that a problem, because again, I feel like everybody is supposed to have a space in this carnival, you know. So the rope, Robert, the rope, exactly. But the exclusivity thing in general is what I would definitely say needs to be left behind, you know.
Ty Lovelace, thank you all so much for that. Ty Lovelace is saying or asking, how do you think queer people are able to present themselves in spaces that aren't middle class?
Gil, when you find out, tell me please, because I would like to know.
Say that again.
I think we attempted to touch on this in the discussion as well.
Maybe comment again. The question.
How do you think queer people are able to present themselves in spaces that aren't middle class?
I mean, I think again, queer people are everywhere. And I think Trinidadian people specifically, Caribbean people in general, there's a way of kind of acknowledging without acknowledging, right? So you talk to older people and you hear about these women who were roommates for 30 years, you know, or people are talking and say, she's so, they'll say she gay, they'll say, she's so, right? Or as, as I think Robert was gesturing to, you have men who are hairdressers or, choir leaders. And not to say that all of those men are queer or genderqueer, but there are certain places where we've made it acceptable to be perhaps just a little bit different. And that's not to say that that is the way that it should be, but I think it's to say that the way that people move, desire is a very powerful thing. And to tell people that they cannot enact their desire does not always work. And so people will find ways to be, and also sometimes our communities will find ways of acknowledging that, or not acknowledging, but also knowing at the same time, if that makes sense.
I want to jump in. I completely agree with Rosamond, and I really love this question because it just makes the point that, that queer people tend to be safer in middle class places, but also that's debatable because I think queer people do exist in low income neighborhoods and have exert a certain kind of safety, right? And that might look, but I think it should, I think the freedoms that we experience here as queer people stop at the naming, right? So you can't name yourself as queer. You could walk how you want, you could wear how you want, and you could engage with ridicule if you want to do that. But then when you name your desire and make it explicit, that's where I think the problem comes along for a lot of people, because like Rosamond is saying, we do have a lot of tolerance for masculine women or feminine men or people that you can't really tell. But yeah, so I feel that's where I would like us to get to, is in every strata of our society, to let people name their desires and pursue their desires without shame, and and with active kind of support and nurturing and that kind of thing. Which is to say, honestly, Ty, I don't know the answer to that question. As I was growing up in a low-income neighborhood, I wasn't identifying as queer, right? Because I didn't find the space to. I know a lot of people who experience freedom in low-income neighborhoods they've grown up there, and so they have a prior relationship, and that kind of like allows for a certain kind of safety to name themselves. But it's hard because there are barriers both ways. Like people who experience freedoms in middle class neighborhoods like me, I can't now go back where I used to live, you know what I mean, and experience any safety there, regardless of who I know and who I don't know. And the same thing is true for somebody who grows up and or still lives in a low-income neighborhood. They might not be able to experience the kinds of safeties that they do there in a middle class or upper class environment. So yeah, so there's something about the barrier too that we have to address and figure out. But anyway, yeah.
Anya Canal is.
Oh, Robert wanted to answer that.
He did.
I
Okay.
want to know his historical thing, the spaces that queer people would have used, right? It's like I was talking about like Mamma Mia in the 70s and early 80s, Carnival Tuesday, there would be a group of people using that space, occupying that space, right? Colonizing that space as theirs. And then there's a shutdown of all the classes. Classing has affected things about what you do. So like the shows that they would have had to celebrate, Queen Bee, Queen of Queens, all those things are either taken over by people to become a very middle class thing, or they're gone. And then there are clubs. There's a guy I know who used to print things for me. He always provided a space. There was the Metal Box, and there were clubs all on Edward Street that people would go to that would be safe spaces. I don't know if they are those safe spaces or if they exist now, they have become a middle class kind of holding, right? So people who belong to Friends for Life, there's no space for them to be. Friends for Life as an organization that supports gay people and also people who have HIV. And they existed on the promenade until they got a building, right? But then the class issue damaged the organization and lost all their funding, right? So those things disappear. So these spaces that provide safety, like say for instance, I'm nothing against Black Box, but the Black Box took over a home that was a space for people to be in on Juve morning, Bohemia. Bohemia had a fete there that was like the biggest queer fete in the whole Caribbean that would happen there, right? And that is gone. It has become again sanitized.
And I just say one other quick comment, because Amir, you mentioned that kind of recognition stops at the level of naming. And we've been using the word queer, but it's also important to note that there are people who don't like the word queer, right? And that there are terms that are actually indigenous to Trinidad that people will use, or that people will sometimes just use so, right? But, you know, and I know some people like Macomer, some people don't like Bulaman, et cetera, but we do have a real range of terms from same gender loving, all sexual, et cetera. And sometimes that's also can be a barrier between, you know, people who identify in one way and folks who say, well, I am the same as you, but I don't want to identify in that way.
Right. There is a book that Rhoda Reddock edited called something about Caribbean Masculinities, and there's an article in it that's called A History of a Bulaman from Trinidad and Tobago. And it started off of having a safe space in Minchell's band with men who would work in Wassa, but also you could bounce up on, right? And there would be a home for that in 81, 82, 83, a home that was safe for people like that. And the article is actually called History of a Bulaman from Trinidad and Tobago.
That's so funny that they work Wassa, because you can say that they sell in pipe in a way. But anyway, Rosamond, I would love to talk with you more about those names. I was talking with a queer friend of mine last night about reclaiming some of those things. So one of the things I'm working on reclaiming is this. Like,
we have a couple more questions and comments to get to. So I want to go to a comment from Anya Canal, not really a question, she says, but thinking about translating Carnival and lessons of Carnival to non-Trini audiences, not for the purposes of exotification or tourism or false premise of oneness in Trinidad, but the lesson of claiming your body and claiming your space. Yeah, so I think she's just summarizing some of her thoughts coming out of this. Michael Fontanelle says, away from the costumes, was the West Indian mass ever an expression of spirituality, individual and communal? And does it still have a role for the spiritual well-being of our society?
I think it definitely has a role for the spiritual well-being of our society. Although that's the second part of the, I should start with the first part. The person was asking outside of the costume, as in not including.
Yes, away from, exactly. Well, it seems so. Away from the costumes is what he says.
I mean, I believe that there is a spiritual connection, but the thing is that I guess is also somewhat determined by one's definition of spiritual, right? So for me, there is a spiritual connection in the carnival as a living thing unto itself, even outside of the costume. But I do not know that that is true for everybody, because what I feel is and believe to be spiritual may not be so for somebody else. And I know that there are many people who would argue that carnival is the antithesis of the spiritual. There are people who feel that way, but I would disagree. And I would also say that yes, it has been so throughout history and definitely has a continuing place. And again, that is coming from what I guess invest in, the ritual of carnival, the whole thing, not just the 2 days, but the time spent leading up to it and whatever one's preparations are. You know, not everybody's preparations are the same, and not everybody's preparations are what one would consider traditional. But I think that if it is that for you, then it is that for you. And yes, it can be that. And to try and suggest that the spiritual and the carnival are opposed is something that I always find sort of myopic, I guess. Yeah.
I've definitely heard people describe it as a sort of spiritual catharsis in a way. You know, people have had all kinds of spiritual experiences, at least that they have described as spiritual experiences in carnival. You know, so I suppose it's one of those things that's in the eyes of the beholder.
Well,
I definitely invest that in the making of my Juve costume, in the mental approach to the whole thing. I certainly do, and I feel as though I am surrounded by people that do. But again, I exist in a certain space in carnival, and I know not everybody has access to that. So I'm sure that there are some people for whom that sounds, you know, very strange.
Robert, you wanted to say something?
The mask I attempt to do, because of the masking and the history of that, the gungun represents ancestral, and Igun is your ancestor. Igungun is the ancestors of the planet, and I think Carnival, even if we don't acknowledge it, is a feast of human history, of celebration of your family, a celebration of people, you know, the connections and that, and it is a spiritual thing, even if you are aware or not aware of it. And things I know, like the Black Indian, they do ancestral stuff before we meet them. We don't get invited. They go, I think they go to they do rituals by the Yoruba Square downtown on Piccadilly Street there, and I think they may even go to some graveyards and do offerings, and that, right? And then the native, the Indian mass, they do rituals for years. They fast for months. They
and
fast
the Jab as well.
to play,
Also has a
right?
period of fasting and
the part of the stick fighting also has rituals. It starts off by opening up the space, making the space, activating the space for the fight to happen. So there are things that are very Black or very Indian, right, or very indigenous that the regular part of Carnival doesn't want to recognize because that is a Christianized, like white, or I don't know if you could understand like that, way of presenting things as clean, right? There's a grittiness that is a connection to, say like pan, steel band is metal, that is Ogun, fire is Oya, and the sound is boom, thunder noise, like Shango, right? So there are things that in your face that you don't see, and plain, like what Rosamond said, things are hidden in plain sight. It's there.
And I think it's important to remember that historically, during enslavement and the post-emancipation period in the late 19th century, almost every aspect of Black culture was outlawed, right? Religions were outlawed, music was outlawed. That's how you get tambu bambu because the drums are outlawed. Almost everything that we wanted to do, our funeral rites were outlawed or were severely restricted. And yet we began to have greater access to Carnival. And so when you tell a people you cannot practice your religion, they don't say, oh, okay, we're so sad. They figure out ways to do it, as as Robert's saying, in plain sight. You might not recognize it. And so I think now in the 21st century, there are all of these things where kind of the spiritual, even sometimes religious, the secular, the sensual, the erotic, they've started to cross in ways that some people choose to recognize and some people cannot see.
I want to add to this. This is a really exciting part because I'm going to put my performance artist hat on a little bit, because what I try to think about in my work is in the same way that a sonnet is a form that you can tell a story with, or a play is a form, or whatever. It feels to me like that there are like elements of truth within Carnival that can be used in performance, right? And so, for instance, I call some of my performances digital juvees, because they are the same thing. They are openings where, for me in my work, I commune with spirit, with the spirits of my late father and stuff like that. So I'm thinking about how can we like call on and draw on the Carnival aesthetic toward healing, and I've done that in my personal work and in my performance work, and hopefully I want to do that more with community. And so that's the thing I feel like that is spiritual, and that is good for our spiritual nature, is like returning again this aesthetics of inclusivity, of flipping the script, right, and turning toward those who are marginalized in our community. And that's the real value of Carnival, is a time when we can say, yo, who not here? And let us try to get them in the room. You know what I mean? And in that way, like there's a freedom, there's like a freedom ethic to it that I feel like people don't notice, and like that we can harness as a way to be. Like we could show the world how to be, because literally in our culture it's embedded. Like, yeah, all of the socialism, all of the social justice, it's here already. We're doing it. Yeah.
We do have a final question, though it's a big one, and we also have just 5 minutes left for this conversation. But I'm going to ask you all to think about how succinctly you can answer this one, right? How responsible do you think our band leaders are when it comes to the representation of women in Carnival and the over-sexualization of their bodies?
Well, we have a mass man here.
The mass man who discovered with the yards of fabric. I think the masquerade is evolving, and also the mask is evolving, right? There is a power that I may not understand of women getting to be what did I don't even want to describe it. First, I have to apologize for my intervention. Everybody, the moderator, Amir, bartels, lucky Rosamond wasn't there. I can lock up video and all. And identify my sexism, right? And most bands are led by men. And I think women may have to lead bands and see what comes up as in that space, but also trying to recognizing where we as men stumble, being able to not apologize for it, but try to listen, like how I try to this time in this presentation. So we have to find a way to give women who are the major part of Carnival the voice of the becoming designers. And or you could either decide to do it, or they do it on them their own, right? And face the brunt of men like me who would try to shut it up.
Thank you, Robert.
I want to say,
apology accepted.
I want to say that for me, like oversexualizing. Well, there are two assumptions I feel like that in that question that I don't necessarily like that I want to point out. One, I think this person is assuming that the band leaders, like, I feel like not assuming, but they're missing that a lot of these women, if they're wearing a costume, they've consented to wearing the costume. And so for me, like, there's no issue there. They're choosing to be as sexual as they want to be. And then to this notion of over-sexualization, I feel like it's very Christian, like Judeo-Christian, and like, we ought to even revisit that because for me, I think, yeah, like, let those titties swang, in my opinion, like, especially in a carnival aesthetic, like that, for people who want that, like using Elisha's words, they should have a space for that. And the band leaders aren't necessarily responsible for that because if people are buying their costumes, people are consenting to wearing it and to embodying in themselves in that way. So yeah, so those are two things I wanted to like problematize in response to that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to bring up the same things that Amir was bringing up. I feel as though I was, when the question was posed, I kind of struggled with an answer for that because of these questions of consent and what people really want. And if you are giving people what they want, then is it a problem? But then that also for me leads to other questions as well. And it feels like a bit of a rabbit hole because there is the question of sexualization and whether that is something that should be being judged as good or bad, over sexualization and whether that is even what is happening here, the consent of the masqueraders, where if they are willing to put their hot dollars down for this, then it would seem that that is what they want. So why is it a problem? But the masqueraders have all been socialized by the patriarchy in terms of what they think they want and what they think they want to present. And so then it gets complicated because how does one even know? Because if you're really going to dig up in that and we're really going to think about what is considered to be sexy and sexual and how much of that is in play on the road and who is actually demanding it, whether it is being demanded by the men, by the women, by both, because there are people who would say that women want to look that way for the men. And then there are other people who would say, but women also want to look that way to impress other women, and their competition with other women is even more of a thing than the trying to attract the attention of the men. And then, of course, that comes back to who even set us up with these ideas of what's attractive and what's sexy. And so, yeah, it just becomes a very thorny issue. And so then I find it hard to blame a band leader per se, simply because the bottom line is, when they put those designs on the wall and put those prices that I am unwilling to pay on them, other people are willing to pay that money. So if John Q. Public and Jane Q. Public is willing to pay for it, then unless you want to dig all the way down into unpicking the ideas of what is sexy and why and who determined it that way and how we as a society want to treat with that, then I kind of feel like, can one even begin to answer that question? You know?
Thank you, Elisha.
Yeah, it's a bit of a chicken and egg, I think, issue. And I think everything that's been said, I agree with. And the only thing that I'll add is that, we do have a few female mask makers. I mean, K2K has been very popular, right? And I think if we look at the people who are playing that mask, I think a lot of them are considering themselves sexy. They might use the word sensual, they might use the word erotic. And so definitely expanding our notion of what sexy is, and definitely supporting more female and and non-binary mask makers as well, to more is more, to have more options.
More options.
That was actually our last question. So I'm just going to give each of you a few seconds to leave us with some closing remarks, this being Carnival Saturday and all. Anything you'd like to share with our listeners, our viewers rather?
I think that I want to say most of all, claim your space. The thing that has really been so sad to hear in this whole conversation, both what we taped before and tonight, is this realization that there are people who don't realize that you can claim a space, and that is, a big part of Carnival unto itself, is that it is for us to each and all and anyone who wants to claim a space. And that is what I want people to remind themselves of and remind everybody else of, and make room for other people to do. Claim a space, claim your space.
Yeah. Robert?
Well, after when we have Carnival 2023, and we spend all our money in masks, right? I hope there are many more independent bands of people who would have find community and have a 10-member band, 5-member band, even play in your own home area. That could be a good thing. I would love to see people deciding that I am going to make my mask because I am a human being. I can practice my creativity and I can make something. And I will try and try and try again. So after 2023, next Carnival.
Thank you, Robert. Rosamond?
Yes, I agree. And I think I would like to remind people that there are a lot of small bands that you can participate with. There's a lot of different kinds of bands. It doesn't have to be all the bikini masks. And I think this year is a great year to begin making your own masks at home. And, Trini's love to say, you play on a mask, in your everyday life as well. A little bit of bling here, a little bit of wine there, to bring that energy and live your best self, your real self, in more days than just at Carnival.
That is exactly what I wanted to say, which is, how do we give ourselves the permissions and freedoms that we have in Carnival throughout the year? Like, how do we find access and access those best selves? And I think that's really important for queer people, for women, for people who don't identify as queer. But so that's what I want to say. And I also want to say thank you. I learned so much in this conversation, and I feel like a student of all of you in a way. And it's just been nice to share space with all of you. Yeah.
I totally have one more thing I have to add really quick, Ardene. I'm sorry. I am so ready for the documentary of Amir's first Carnival making and playing his own mask. Let's make it
come on.
happen.
You're right.
I am here for it.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Amir, Rosamond, Elisha, and Robert. Thank you for making time again to be here with us live and to be with our viewers, of course. Thank you to all of the Bocas Lit Fest crew working so hard behind the scenes to bring this to you, both a week and more ago and tonight. Marielle, Nicholas, Shivani, Alana Marie, and everybody else who's contributed to making this what it has been. And of course, you, our viewers, for staying the course with us. We know we had a few hiccups earlier. As I said at the start, you can look out for the entire Facebook video not too long from now, as well as YouTube. the entire conversation as well as the Q&A will be available on demand for you. So do enjoy, have a good one, a safe one, and maybe as Robert said, we'll be back in 2023 on the road.
Carnival.